the remains of this creature, can sell for the price of a house on the black market? Do you think it's because they are rare? You couldn't be more wrong. In 2018, Moroccan customs intercepted a shipment of Ammonite fossils. The buyers were all international defense enterprises because scientists discovered that the spiral structure of the Ammonite hides a terrifying formula. It can withstand the pressure of 10,000 meters deep in the ocean, yet it is only as thin as an eggshell. Even more incredible. NASA used this formula to design rocket shells, reducing the weight by a staggering percentage. But the most chilling truth is, this creature ruled the oceans for 300 million years, making it even older than the dinosaurs. Yet they vanished collectively and mysteriously 65 million years ago. It was the same time as the dinosaur extinction. The only living relative is the nautilus. After dissection, scientists discovered a piece of tissue in its brain, with a function that remains unexplained to this day. And this tissue is growing at an extremely slow rate. Wait a moment. I want to tell you something. Many people, when seeing an Ammonite fossil in a museum for the first time, their first reaction is, isn't this just a rock? Coiled into a spiral shape, with delicate patterns carved on the surface, resembling blooming chrysanthemums. That is how the name originated. But it isn't a rock. It was a real living animal. Moreover, it is an animal that, after modern engineers examine its fossils, causes them to fall into a collective silence. Ammonites belong to the class Cephalopoda, making them true relatives of today's octopus and squid. The nautilus is their closest living kin. If you strip away the outer shell, its body is essentially a small octopus with tentacles and a hard beak. But the variation in their size is staggering. The smallest are only 1 centimeter long, like a coin in the palm of your hand. The largest shells can reach a diameter of 2.5 meters. 2 adults lying head-to-toe would barely match its length. Something this large floating in the sea would look like a giant moving eyeball staring at you. But actually, what is truly shocking isn't its size, but what is hidden inside its shell. When paleontologists first cut open an Ammonite fossil, they were stunned. The interior of the shell is not solid. Instead, it is precisely divided into dozens of sealed small chambers. Each chamber has its own individual partition, biologically known as camera. The Ammonite's body only lives in the outermost, largest chamber. All other chambers contain no body tissue. They are filled only with gas. What's even more remarkable is what runs through all the camerae, a thin tube called the siphuncle. Through the siphuncle, the Ammonite precisely regulates within each chamber the ratio of gas to liquid. To float up, it pumps gas into the camerae. To sink, it pumps in water. This system allows the Ammonite to hover at any depth in the ocean, without needing to swim frantically like a fish. When it wants to move, it only needs to eject a jet of water from its funnel-like mouth, propelling its entire body forward. This buoyancy control system preceded the human invention of the submarine by exactly 400 million years. 400 million years ago, a creature on Earth had already built such a device. Would you call this evolution? Or something else we haven't quite figured out yet? But the high-tech features of the Ammonite don't end there. Look closely at the surface of an Ammonite fossil, and you will find complex patterns, like the veins of a leaf, or fractal geometric patterns, winding and turning, so intricate they make your skin crawl. These are not decorations. These are called suture lines. They are the junctions between the septa and each chamber wall. Scientists have discovered a pattern. The later the Ammonite appeared in history, the more complex the suture lines became, the more folded layers there were, and the more detailed the patterns became. Why? Because the more complex the folding structure, the greater the surface area of contact, the higher the strength, and the more terrifying the water pressure it can withstand. This is why an Ammonite's shell, though only as thin as an eggshell, can withstand the pressure of 10,000 meters deep. After NASA engineers studied this structure, they applied the same folding principle, to the design of rocket shells. The result was that for the same level of strength, the weight was reduced by 40 to ram. An animal that went extinct 65 million years ago taught humans how to build rockets through its remains, relying on this mobile castle. The Ammonite family, 400 million years ago, quickly occupied the global oceans. But what happened next is the truly breathtaking part. In Earth's history, Ammonites experienced a total of 3 mass extinction events. Each one was enough to wipe most life forms off the face of the Earth. The first was the late Devonian mass extinction. Global temperatures plummeted, and ocean oxygen levels dropped sharply. Even the top predator of the ocean at the time, Dunkleosteus, went completely extinct. What was the scale of Dunkleosteus? It was 10 meters long, with a bite force exceeding 5 tons. More terrifying than today's great white shark? Even a monster like that died out, but the Ammonites survived. The second was the end Permian mass extinction. This was the most tragic event in Earth's history. 96 phantarum of species in the ocean vanished completely. The entire trilobite family was wiped out. The entire ocean almost became a dead sea. The Ammonite population was hit hard, but they pulled through. The third was the end Triassic mass extinction, which took away nearly half of all species. Once again, the Ammonites survived. After every disaster, as long as a few survivors remained, millions of years later, they would evolve into thousands of new forms, refilling the entire ocean. At their peak, Ammonites evolved into over 10,000 forms worldwide, ruling the oceans for a total of 390 million years. This duration is more than twice the lifespan of dinosaurs. They survived 3 major mass extinctions completely. Such vitality, when placed in the context of the entire history of life on Earth, is considered top tier. But just when the Ammonites seemed invincible, something bizarre occurred. In the late Cretaceous, the era of dinosaurs, the Ammonite family began to grow irregularly. The formerly regular spiral shells, scientists collectively classified this group as heteromorph ammonites. Some shells stopped coiling entirely, turning into straight rods floating in the ocean, known as baculites. Some coiled into towering spire-like shapes, resembling a twisted ice cream cone, known as turtlites. There is an even more extreme type, known as nipponites. Its shell is coiled in a chaotic manner, like a paperclip crumpled by hand, with no discernible pattern at all. Scientists have studied them for a long time, but have yet to figure out the actual purpose of these shapes. Some argue it was to adapt to specific ecological niches. Others suggest it was for defense against predators. However, growing evidence points to an embarrassing conclusion. These shapes might have had no function at all. The evolution of the ammonite had gone off track. And what was the price of this deviation? These bizarre, oddly shaped shells brought about a fatal side effect. Their hydrodynamic performance collapsed completely. The ammonites of that period almost entirely lost their ability to swim actively. They became drifting bottles in the ocean. Swept away by the currents, they could only survive by eating plankton that drifted to their mouths, or by waiting silently for food to bump into them. Just imagine, once the ocean overlords that could roam the deep sea freely, now just floating and waiting for a meal. What's worse, at the same time, a new competitor appeared in the ocean. The most ferocious marine predator of the late Mesozoic, reaching lengths of up to 17 meters. It could crush an ammonite's shell in a single bite. Meanwhile, the rising teleost fishes were agile and swift, stealing all the food that once belonged to the ammonites. The marine legend that survived 3 mass extinctions had now become an old man wearing magnificent armor. But walking with a stumble, the armor became increasingly exquisite, yet the body became increasingly fragile. Then, 66 million years ago, that asteroid about 10 kilometers in diameter, STRUCK, the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The dinosaurs went extinct. We all know this. But what happened in the ocean was even more desperate than on land. The impact kicked up dust that blotted out the sky. Sunlight was blocked, and phytoplankton at the ocean surface died on a massive scale. The foundation of the entire food chain was broken. At the same time, large amounts of carbon dioxide and sulfides flooded the atmosphere, causing the oceans to acidify rapidly. For the calcium carbonated-based shells of the Ammonites, acidic seawater began to erode bit by bit. The intricate shells they had spent hundreds of millions of years perfecting. But the truly fatal blow came from a place you might not expect reproductive strategy. Ammonites laid an enormous number of eggs, but the eggs were tiny. The hatched larvae were almost as microscopic as plankton, forced adrift in the shallow surface waters, relying on phytoplankton to survive. And the shallow surface waters were precisely where the impact caused the most devastating damage. Sunlight vanished, phytoplankton died, and the ammonite larvae almost all starved to death. Without the next generation, there is no future. Thousands of ammonite species were completely wiped out within a few tens of thousands of years. In the same ocean, in the same catastrophe, the nautilus survived to this day, while the ammonite went extinct. This contrast has kept paleontologists researching for years. The difference lies right here. The nautilus produces only a few large eggs at a time. The hatched larvae are about 3 centimeters long, much stronger than the microscopic larvae of the ammonite. Nautiluses have long lived in deep waters of 50 to 300 meters, where the impact of a meteorite has far less effect than on the surface. The food chain disruption was limited. More importantly, by analyzing the stable carbon isotopes in the shells, scientists found that the metabolic rate of the nautilus is significantly lower than that of the ammonite. A low metabolic rate means lower demand for food. When the food chain collapses, this, ironically, becomes the best trump card for survival. The nautilus has hardly evolved for hundreds of millions of years. It has remained unchanged, often mocked by many as a living fossil. But in the end, the one that didn't evolve at all survived, while those that evolved to the extreme disappeared. Nature played a cruel joke. Now, returning to the question at the beginning, in the brain of the nautilus, that tissue with a function still unexplained is growing at an extremely slow pace. Scientists don't know what it's doing, don't know what it's preparing for. Some researchers have proposed a bold guess. The nautilus might be at some kind of extremely slow evolutionary node. It's spent hundreds of millions of years remaining unchanged. But perhaps now, a switch is being quietly turned on. As for the final gift the ammonite left for this world, it is the scale of time. Geologists can accurately determine the age of rocks, based on which ammonite fossil they find. With minimal margin of error, after death, they became the yardsticks of Earth's history. Measuring time with their remains, the ammonite told us one thing through 390 million years of existence. Evolution is not about perfection. It is about staying alive. It bet all its resources on its shell, making it flawless and impregnable, thinking that in this way, it could live forever. But when the environment changed, that perfect armor became its heaviest shackle. Power does not equate to eternity. Adaptation is the true way to survive. Nature does not reward perfection. It only rewards the survivors. The wind is still blowing, and the story continues. It is simply that the protagonist has changed.